Hello, welcome back to whatever this is, some form of video on OT school. This is going to be a video about my neuroanatomy final. I had previously done a video about my first neuro exam, and I definitely think I need a follow-up since then. So in that previous video, I had talked about how it was a lot of content, but nothing more difficult than normal anatomy. Things definitely changed after that first exam, so I kind of want to talk about that change and also kind of explain what this final exam is going to look like for me. So the first exam that I took for neuroanatomy was very much anatomy. It was something I was used to, even though it was a lot. But after that first exam, most of what we've been learning is more application-based, which is, of course, more difficult. But, you know, application-based things is also something I've sort of done, so should be alright, right? What I had never done, and what is, I think, the biggest problem with neuro, and what people struggle with so much, are pathways. I'm gonna show you through a drawing. It's not the best drawing, but you know, I'm not an artist. So this is kind of supposed to be a diagram of your brain and spinal cord. So you have your brain up here. These are your thalamuses. This is your brain stem, and then this is your spinal cord. So the gist of pathways are that they're kind of bundles of nerves that go up and down your body, taking information to and from your brain. So for sensory pathways, you sense something out on like your hands or your feet, it goes up into your brain. For motor pathways, you think that you want to move, it goes from up in your brain, down and out to your muscles. And then there's also some other things that just stay in the spinal cord that have to do with your cerebellum and, you know, I don't want to use too many words, but like proprioception and stuff. None of that really matters. All you need to know is that there are a bunch of like wires, essentially, running up and down this space. I have not counted recently, but off of the top of my head, if I remember correctly, there are about between 16 and 18 pathways that you need to know, and you have to memorize each step of where they are. So you might have for example, two pathways that I've just drawn, which may or may not be right. I'm not done studying. And you might have the first one, which pops in, hits a specific spot in the spinal cord, goes to the other side of the spinal cord in a different spot, travels up through a bunch of specific structures, and goes to a specific spot on the brain. So you have to memorize what point it's hitting at each spot, and also where it crosses. And then you have to do the same thing for this other one, which instead enters at a different point and doesn't cross until later. So that's a ton of memorizing structures and memorizing where things cross for what looks like the same thing. It's very hard to remember the difference between all of these different wires. You can imagine just, you know, 16 different lines drawn on this, all in different little teeny places and moving across different lines. it's a lot to memorize, and there's not really a good way to, use a mnemonic or anything like that. It's just brute memorization. And once you have those memorized, what you're learning about is if there's an injury anywhere in here, what does it affect? So your questions on a test are, for example, this person has this symptoms, and it might be, some symptoms from one pathway and some from another, and you have to sit there with that question. Think about what pathway relates to the symptoms they're having, then where in this nervous system does that pathway go, and where do the multiple pathways that are affected line up, and then that's where the lesion is. And if that sounds complicated, it's because it is. And also, because a lot of things overlap, it feels like basically every part of the brain, if you're talking about like cerebrum lesions, does something like movement, sensation, emotion, behavior, social functions, proprioception. It's not actually, that every single area does the same thing, but it very much feels like it. And so I think that's why neuroanatomy is so hard for people, is that it's just not... It's just that neuroanatomy has a lot of very intricate overlapping pieces and a lot to remember. And even if you're, really good at memorization, this is probably going to push the limits of your ability to do that. I thought a good way to kind of also think about this is for functional anatomy, which I took last semester, and that's on, basically the whole rest of the body, excluding the nervous system. I used Quizlet, which is just, virtual flashcards. And I had, I believe, about 8 flashcard sets by the time I got to my final. Which might not mean anything out of context, but, I had 8 big areas of information that I was learning, and 8 big areas to study going into the test. Now for neuroanatomy, I am making the same size flashcard sets in the same way. But I currently have 44 flashcard sets, which is, a lot bigger than 8. And I still haven't finished watching all of the lectures. I have about 5 more lectures. One of which being an hour-long lecture. So by the end of this, I will likely have about 49 flashcard sets to study for the final, which is just kind of outlandish. And it's a cumulative final. I think I'll be okay. I feel like I can learn pretty much everything. It's just the pathways that are going to be really hard for me. We had a midway exam, which I guess would have been a midterm, that was just on the pathways, and I tried to just memorize them, but the only way I could get through was with like 3 mnemonics that didn't really make sense. And I ended up getting a B, but I walked out of the test thinking I flat out failed because I was just so unsure of the information. So I think that's going to be the biggest struggle with this exam as well, It's just learning all of the little teeny pieces of these pathways to make things a little more spicy. Our exam is going to be 3 hours long, which I am not honestly sure how long our other exams have been. It's probably been between 1 and 2 hours. I know I normally take like 45 minutes or so on an exam. But we've been told that to prepare us for the NBCOT, which is a 4-hour test, and that's, you know, what you need to take in order to get your license. The length of our test is going to, or the length of our tests is going to slowly increase to kind of build up our endurance, which I think makes sense. And, you know, I appreciate the thought. That's something that they had gotten feedback on from past alumni, that would be helpful. I personally would rather not have it be that way. I've already taken the GRE, which was a 4-hour test. I think it was actually 4.5 when I took it. And I did fine. I don't feel like I needed multiple long tests to prepare me for what it's like to sit for a long test. But I understand that that's, you know, just a me thing. But that does mean that there'll be a lot of very wordy questions to read, just because of the nature of how neuro is. So the strategy I'm going to try and go with is a brain dump when I go into the exam. So with almost every exam I've ever had, including all of my exams in OT school, you're given a piece of paper, like scrap paper, when you enter. And my plan is to draw all of the pathways, draw out the blood flow, and draw out the cranial nerves, because I think those are going to be the main bits of information, because those are the main structures involved in injuries that an OT would need to know about. And so that way, while my brain is at its highest energy, I've gotten all of that information down. And then when I'm going through the test, I can just reference it, almost like I have a textbook sitting right there for me, instead of each time trying to pull through my memory and getting more and more foggy and confused as I go on. So that's going to be what I'm working on. Because of the way my energy has worked, I did want to start studying for finals kind of during my last weekend, but that was an on-campus weekend for me, so I didn't really have the energy. So I'm a little behind. So instead of just studying one module today, I'm studying 5, which ended up being about 20 flashcard sets. I've already gone through all of them once, and I star what I don't remember, and then study from that, which cuts out a lot of my time. So for the rest of the day, that's what I plan on doing, is going back through and actually learning the starred stuff. And then from here out, I just have basically every day a new module added. Not just for neuro, for all of my classes, but neuro will definitely be the main one that takes up most of my time. And also, the neuro exam is 20% of our grade. I currently have, I want to say an 87 in neuro. I might be lying to you. Hold on. I actually have an 88.57 in neuro right now, which is great. But the only problem is that we just had a paper due. It was an 8-page paper, but it had 6 pages of instructions that were very difficult to follow. Just a lot of really intense formatting. And I've yet to be graded for that paper, and that paper is the same weight. And that paper is the same weight as this test. So I can't really know how I need to do on this exam until I get that paper back. And I really don't know when that will be. Currently, if I got a grade that did not affect my overall grade in the class on the paper, I could get a 0 on the final and just barely get a 70, which is what I need to pass the class. But of course, if my neuro paper goes bad, basically at all, then that would be different. And I do not have high hopes for the neuro paper, even though I tried my best. There were just so many little rules, in which case, I don't know what I would need on my final. So I'll continue to do the math because that's, a good use of my time while I should be studying for finals, and keep you updated, but I'm not really sure when else I'll check in. Probably closer to when I'm panicking because I still don't know my pathways, and then after the exam, and then when I get my grade. We'll see. Of course, I lied, and instead of going to study, I immediately decided to do the math on what I would need, because I was hoping it would relax me, and I think it has. I don't know how well you can see that, but essentially, I did the math, and with my current grade in the class, that will account for about 60% of my total grade. So even if I did nothing else, didn't get graded for the paper or the final, I would currently have a 53%, or finish out with a 53% or an F. So, I definitely need the other portions. For the final, I put in what if I could see, just based off of I got a B on my last test and an A on my first test. So downward trend, let's say I get a 70%. That would add 14% to my final grade, which would mean that if I got a C on the final, like flat 70%, I would need to get a 15% on my paper in order to get a flat 70 C to pass the class. Now, what I think is probably going to happen is that for my paper, I'll probably get, a C or a B, which will give me a lot more wiggle room on my final. So we'll wait and see for when the grades come out, but this is the only class I'm concerned about, and I think I will be okay. I'm still going to study, but definitely don't have to be as concerned and overwhelmed as I was feeling. Let's hope I remember that. Maybe. Okay, so it is nighttime, and Angel's getting a little antsy because it's getting close to her food time, so she's probably gonna be meowing, but I promise she's okay. Yeah. So today is April 26th. It's, I think, been about a week since I did the last video. Today is Wednesday night. It's like 10 o'clock at night right now. And I just wanted to update you. I haven't had my finals yet. I have stuff written down, so I'll be looking down. I'm talking quietly because my boyfriend is sleeping. He works nights. So I did go through all 44 of my flashcards for Neuro twice, and, you know, worked through and starred the things that I needed to work on. I watched those lectures I had talked about. I have 23 sets of flashcards that have some material that I would like to go over more, and that could be like one card in the set, but that was the best way I could quantify it, which feels overwhelming. So for this whole time, well, for most of this week, I've been working through large chunks of flashcards over and over again to try and get done and get the material learned, working on drawing stuff from memory so that I can draw it when I go into the test, and mainly just doing Neuro. Like, that's all I was focusing on because I felt so unprepared. Yeah. So I just got really burnt out, and anytime I would take a break and not study, I would feel bad that I wasn't studying and anxious that I wasn't studying, so I was never really relaxing. And so I did put in a lot of time, but it definitely wasn't the amount of time I wish I could have put in. I spent so much time feeling like paralyzed anxiety about doing the flashcards that basically I spent more time thinking about doing the thing than actually doing it. And then yesterday I started having like stomach pain in relation to my anxiety, which is normal for me. But, you know, makes it even harder to study. I will say that in undergrad, tests didn't work me up, but this is the second finals we've had, and both times I've been pretty anxious. I think part of it is that in grad school, the percent of your grade is much larger for finals, and a lot of your grade, at least in my courses, isn't finalized until very close to the exam or after the exam, so you really don't know where you stand. And I'm still not really sure what happens if you get below a C. I know if you get a flat F in the class, you get kicked out of the program because it says that in the handbook. And I know you need a C to pass class, but if you get, like, if you don't pass a class, do they let you retake it? I'm really not sure. But anyway, so this morning, or this afternoon, whatever, I had therapy, and we spent the whole session talking about finals, which is very not the norm for me. Normally that's kind of stress that I can handle on my own, but it was really getting to me. And I bring this up because if you're somebody who hasn't gone into grad school yet, this is important to know, so that you can prepare yourself with learning like coping strategies and also having a support network in place. And if you're in grad school, you can know that this is unfortunately a common thing. And it's not just you. A lot of people end up with imposter syndrome because of how anxious the tests make them. Something that was really helpful that my therapist talked me through is talking about the things you have done. So, for example, me going through 44 flashcard sets and learning all of this information. Hi, baby girl. Yeah. If someone else had done that, what traits would you describe them as? So, for example, persistent or determined. And then acknowledging that, like, those are traits that you have. And so for me, even if something goes wrong on this exam and things don't work out, even though that'll be really scary, I have those traits to figure it out from there. So today was also really stressful because today was the day we were supposed to, we were told we should get our neuro paper grade, which is like a really heavy grade. It was worth 20% of our full grade. And also we were supposed to get emails about our first fieldwork placement. So, you know, I'm constantly checking my phone to try and figure that out. It ended up being that at like 9:30 I did get my paper grade. So before, 45% of my grade was unknown. I felt like I was going to do poorly on this paper because different things made me feel like it was going to be graded harshly. And so if I did poorly on the paper, I'd have to do really well on this final exam, and I have very little confidence in my ability to do that based off of the practice exams. So that was very nerve-wracking to not know. But we got that, and so now I did my calculations, and I only need a 15% on the final in order to get a C and pass the class, which is such a relief because I know I can do that. Or at least I think I can do that. And we also have one more grade that is only, I think, 5%. That hasn't been graded yet, but that could also change the amount that I need on the final to be less. But that's like less than 25%, which if you were just guessing, you should be able to do 25% on a multiple choice exam. So I should be okay, which is great. And that just leaves my one eval class as a class that I need to do better on a final. So currently I need to get a 45% on the final, which is definitely doable, but I'm going to have to study more. And that's with a 0 on the, like, mock assessment we have to do. So that class was all about giving different OT assessments. So part of our testing is to do almost like a competency where we're given a case study and then we have to pick an assessment and give it. I don't have much confidence in that. Just because I didn't know that was something we were gonna have to do until like very recently. That might be my fault. I'm not sure. So that current calculation is based on getting a 0 on that part. But I probably wouldn't get a 0. I'd probably do a little bit better. So yeah, I think I'm gonna be okay. I still haven't gotten my fieldwork placement, I have a feeling that's going to be a bit of a mess for me because I live, she is really yelling, so out of the way of where my school is, but that's okay. I'm honestly not worried about that. It'll get figured out. But yeah, I just feel a lot better now, but you know, I don't feel like I'm gonna fail. I have a feeling that I'll get anxious again, because if I remember right, I had done math for my last finals and knew I basically wasn't gonna fail. But I still got really anxious the night before. So we'll see. But yeah, I'll, I guess, check in with you later. Alrighty, so our angle's not going to be great, and the lighting's probably not going to be great either. I turned that light off so it wouldn't be super shining, and making the camera look bad. So we get what we get. I also just took a shower, so of course I have notes written that I'm gonna go through. So I finished out finals. Neuro went better than I expected. When we took our last exam in that class, I felt like I was really struggling to get through the problems because the words took so much time for me to process. Like, I was so unfamiliar with the terms. It almost felt like, you know when you take a pre-test in a class and like you don't know any of this stuff, so you're just like trying to fumble your way through it? It felt like that, which is why I was so surprised I did okay. But the final just felt like a normal test, which was great. I got my grade back, and I got a 77.5 on the test, I think. And I felt weirdly bad about it, because, you know, it's a C. But then I had to remind myself, like, this is almost a B, first of all. But it's a, like, it is a good grade for all of the content that was on that exam. And so I should be proud of myself for being able to take a test that encompasses the entire semester and know, like, almost 80% of the content. I ended the course with a B. And allegedly, hopefully, that is the hardest course. Definitely for our first year, but it's been said it's the hardest course in OT school. Content-wise. There are later courses that have just a lot of workload, but content-wise, this is hopefully the hardest. For groups, I didn't feel good. I thought I probably did fine, but it felt like I was kind of just guessing for certain answers. Not because I don't understand the content. It was more that I didn't understand it well enough to pick the best choice. Which is definitely my fault. I don't know how I forgot, but we literally had an exam review, and I didn't study that. Don't know what I was doing, studying my own thing. But when I got my grade, I got a 90 on the final, which was great, and I ended with an A in the course. For evaluations, I was, like, I knew I should be concerned because of how much I needed. I needed, like, a 45% on the final, which might sound like a ridiculous reason to be stressed, but with these cumulative finals, you know, you should be stressed. This is very important. But I just didn't have the energy to. So I like kind of studied. When I took the test, I felt good, but I was very unsure about the application portion. We had like kind of a competency. I wish I could tell you about it, but I can't. But I ended up doing really well on both, and I got an A in the class. So that finishes out all of my finals for this second semester of OT school. To keep you kind of updated on our cohort, I mentioned this just because it's often mentioned you should look at like the actual graduation rates of a program, and I always assumed that that meant that people were like failing because things were too hard. And so I think it's important to kind of talk about the humanity behind those numbers. So I do know one student, at least, who has said that they might need to take a leave of absence because they couldn't get a large enough loan. A lot of people have mentioned struggling with loans, especially because people didn't realize you had to file, including this summer's tuition in your last loan. So some people's tuition was like way under what they needed. And then I also know someone who has said they don't know if, basically they have a lot riding on this grade. That could be the difference between whether they are put on academic probation or not, which I finally learned about. Academic probation, you have 2 semesters, or maybe it's a year, but I think it's 2 semesters, to get your GPA back up to a 3.0, or else you are removed from the program. And the same if you get an F, like an actual F, then you are removed from the program. We've also been doing a lot with our first field work, but I'm going to make another video about that. So, this is the end of my second finals vlog. Thank you for watching, and I have about 2 weeks. Well, actually, we're almost done with this first week. I waited a little bit to make this so I can get my grades. So I have like a week and a few days left before I have to start the next semester and do it all over again. So, I guess I'll update you at some point. Maybe next finals, maybe not. Depends on how hard it is.